Hi folks, this is Russ Wallers in the Department of Marketing in the Miller College of Business, and welcome to Marketing Principles 300 online. We are going to take a quick look at a couple concepts in the seventh chapter of our text dealing with business and organizational customers and their buying behavior. So last chapter we talked about the final consumer. Now we're moving into a discussion of the organizational buyer. After studying the chapter, you should be able to identify different types of businesses and organizational buyers. Examine why business and organizational purchase decisions often involve multiple influences, which is a key difference between organizational buyers and the final consumer. Examine the problem-solving behavior of organizational buyers, and a quick look at how they obtain market information. Investigate the different types of buyer-seller relationships and explore how buying by service firms, retailers, wholesalers, and the government is similar to and different from the buying by manufacturers. So that's our roadmap. We'll look at differences between organizational customers and final consumers, and some key characteristics of specific types of organizational customers. So that's the outline of the reading material at hand. In this material, we focus on four types of business and organizational customers: producers or manufacturers, intermediaries, the government, and also not-for-profits. That's the framework for discussion. And producers, we're talking about manufacturing firms, farms, extractive industries like mining, possibly financial institutions and other providers. Intermediaries, we're talking about wholesalers and retailers primarily, different types of those. We'll talk about those in a later chapter. In terms of government as a customer, we're talking about both federal and state and local, and then the nonprofit sector. So that's our focus. One of the big differences between purchasing by the final consumer and buyer behavior by organizational customers, whether it's producers or intermediaries or whatever, is that to a large extent the organizational buyers tend to buy on the basis of specifications. That's very typical, especially in the manufacturing industry where companies are buying raw materials and parts and so forth. So purchasing by specification, in many cases on bid, which we'll talk about, is a distinguishing characteristic. And also, a lot of organizational buyers look for some type of quality certification on the part of their vendors. Right now, we often talk about ISO 9000 standards, and what this is a standard that vendors meet that certifies that they're capable of a certain level of quality control, and that instills some confidence on the part of buyers. So that's often a very important purchasing criterion used in the organizational buying sector. This slide is very important, and this is really one big difference between purchasing by the final consumer and purchasing by organizational consumers, and that is the buying center. In a lot of cases, when you look at how products and services are purchased by organizational buyers, whether it's a manufacturing firm, a government entity, whatever, you often find a buying center comprised of multiple individuals. In many cases, you have an actual buyer that executes the purchase, but you also have people that use the product. Maybe it's someone out in the factory on the production floor, or perhaps a foreman who specifies what type of material they need by issuing a requisition. They're part of the buying center. You may also have some influencers that are involved, maybe somebody in quality control. You might have a decider who's a different person, and you might have also a gatekeeper that controls the flow of information. This topic is very well developed in the text, but the point is, if you're, let's say you're a industrial products sales representative calling on a customer, and you've got your sales presentation prepared. The question is, who do you call on? Who makes the decisions? Do you call on the buyer? Do you call on the decider? First of all, you have to get past the gatekeeper. So that's a very important distinction between organizational buyers and buyers in the final consumer market. And what a lot of purchasing people do, a lot of buyers do, is when they have sales reps called, they'll try to have a meeting and get everybody in the same room so everybody's on the same page. But that's often a very difficult problem for industrial sales reps when they call on a customer, is trying to figure out who to direct the marketing information to. So that's an important issue. In the organizational buying process, there are different types of purchasing that go on. One type of purchasing is called new task buying, and that's often a case where something new, previously unpurchased, is needed, and that's often the case for major purchases that are purchased infrequently. Those types of new task buying problems require a lot of time. There are a lot of multiple influences involved in the buying center. Sometimes there's an extended review of suppliers, and it takes a lot of information. On the other side of the spectrum, there's a straight rebuy type of purchasing, and that's perhaps for maybe a maintenance, repair, and operating supply that's purchased frequently over a long period of time, and that usually takes little time to purchase. Usually there are very few people that are involved in the decision. Usually the purchasing person or the buyer can make the decision independently. Often there is a very limited review of suppliers, and the information may be maybe not that great at all. We could be talking about buying hardware supplies for maintenance. You just call up the hardware store and maybe an industrial supply house and place an order. So that's called a straight rebuy. And then somewhere in the middle is what we call the modified rebuy. And the issue in that sense, recognizing the different types of processes, is that the influences on the decision making vary from one type of purchasing process to the other. In a lot of cases, if a firm is buying, let's say, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies on a routine, automated basis, there may be a little opportunity for a new supplier to get his or her foot in the door to get some of that business, because it's pre-established business. That's not the case with new task buying, where the sales rep has a lot more opportunity. And that topic is developed in the text, so that's a good thing to take a look at. Organizational buyers use both marketing and non-marketing sources of information, and they also use personal sources and impersonal sources. This graphic shows some examples of what we're talking about here. An organizational buyer that relies on a sales rep, for instance, is using a marketing resource of a personal nature. But down in the lower left-hand corner, an impersonal marketing controlled source of information might be website content, maybe an e-commerce website, which is becoming more and more common in organizational buying. So the point is that organizational buyers use a variety of information sources, both personal and impersonal, relying more and more today on technology, and also some of the sources they use are marketing related, some are non-marketing related. Manufacturers are important industrial customers, organizational buyers, and if you look at the nature of manufacturing, you find that there are a lot of medium and small size manufacturing firms. Um, there are some gigantic manufacturing firms, but uh, also a lot of very small ones. They tend to cluster in geographic area by industry. For instance, the hardwood furniture industry is clustered in what, North Carolina. The aerospace industry is largely clustered in the Pacific Northwest, so forth. Um, Business data is compiled by the Census of Manufacturing and available for use by marketing researchers. It's readily available, free of charge, and a lot of this material is organized by NAICS codes, which is an acronym for North American Industrial Classification System codes. And the way the NAICS codes work, here's an example. This is a kind of a very rough example, but any manufacturing firm that reports to the Census Bureau through the Commerce Department, basically any manufacturing firm that pays taxes has to report, is assigned an NAICS code number. The first two digits of the code number define the classification that the manufacturing firm falls into. So, for instance, the construction industry, that any firm in that industry, their NAICS code number begins with the first two digits 23. Manufacturing 31, retailing 44, and so forth. It's very, very all-inclusive system, and there's a NAICS code book that has a list of all of the code numbers that are listed. But to just to continue with this example, let's say we're looking at the manufacturing sector, Sector 31, and in particular, the apparel industry manufacturing would be assigned another digit. They would be assigned 315. Notice food is 311. That's still in the manufacturing sector. Leather 316, and so forth. Within the apparel industry, the cut and sew apparel sector of the apparel manufacturing industry, now we're using a four-digit NAICS code number 3152. And with even more detail, women's and girls' apparel within the cut and sew manufacturing industry is assigned 31523. So let's say you're marketing a product and you think one of the customer sectors might be women's and girls' cut and sew apparel manufacturing. And you want to know how large that business is. You go to the Census of Manufacturing and look up the volume of business in that sector under NAICS code number 31523. Let's say you're talking about blouses. That it's even reported in the Census of Manufacturing in more detail. Blouses would be 315232. So the point is that if you're involved in organizational buying, or if you're selling to a market and you're making estimates of market sizes, this is especially important in manufacturing or let's say industrial marketing. There is a wealth of information that the Census Bureau has that's broken down by NAICS code, and it's available free of charge through the Commerce Department, and it's a great tool. It's a great tool for segmenting markets and estimating market demand potential. In contrast to manufacturers, service providers tend to be smaller and more geographically dispersed, more spread out. Car repair services, medical services, legal services, and so forth. And their buying tends to be a lot less formal than manufacturing firms. So that's another distinction between that type of customer. Retailers and wholesalers buy products and services for resale to their customers. So that's a little different than a manufacturing firm, which is buying parts for integrating into their own uh, production. Quality and service are all important in either case, but it's a little different issue. There's a section on retailing that we'll cover later on in the course, and we'll get into some of these issues in a lot more detail than are shown in this chapter. But be sure you read the material on this chapter. And also the government market. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the General Services Administration that purchases products for the federal government and some of the military, I believe, is the largest single customer in the U.S. And at any rate, the federal government and the state and local governments collectively represent a lot of market potential. They typically purchase in a little different way than a lot of other organizational customers. They're very much driven by competitive bids, and it's important if you're a supplier to the government that you get on the approved supplier list for a lot of products. Sometimes there are competitive bidding arrangements, but the contracts might be negotiated as well. Let's say you're aircraft manufacturer developing a new type of aerospace weapon for the Air Force. A lot of those custom design type of mega million dollar purchases are based on negotiated contracts, and that's a different type of purchasing. In dealing with foreign governments, there's also there are also some differences. There's a lot of opportunities for variances in ethical standards and legal standards when dealing with foreign governments. And there's a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that guides business for U.S. firms dealing with foreign customers. So make sure you read that over in the material. Government market is collectively a very large market. So that pretty much leads us through the main points in Chapter 7. Again, make sure that you look over the key terms at the end of the chapter, and we will be back on the air here with another installment soon. So be careful out there, and we'll see you online. Thanks.